Modern dating advice says that you have to have a list of things that you need to be looking for in a long term relationship companion. And it also tells you to experience a diverse amount of experiences as a single person before settling down. But what if I told you that every time I've sat down with elderly couples who've been together 20 plus years, who have relationships that anybody would admire. So we're not talking about the unhappy couples who are just going along to get along, but couples who have a genuine love and burning desire for each other, even 20 plus years, 30 years, 40, 50 years, even in a couple of cases. And they have these relationships that I personally admire and that anybody would admire as a relationship to look up to. And whenever I have talked to these people and kind of loosely interviewed them, I found that they're doing life much differently than what modern dating advice would tell you. They're doing things much differently than the conversations that you're finding on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, social media, whatever. Even relationship sort of related or dating related advice, books and whatever. These people are doing things much, much differently. And I'm surprised I haven't done a stream on this yet. um, but we're going to explore all that today. Okay. So here's the backstory on this. I have a psychology background, as many of you know, as well as a military background. And in the military, I got to learn and use some aspects of performance psychology, being a better, performing better, and also more or less persuasion, right? Being able to be very persuasive to get people to do things. And that was all very interesting and something I still am interested in today. But for my own personal happiness and sort of, we could say journey, whatever we want to call it. Was that the 2025 word for it? For my journey. I was very interested in relationship psychology. It was something I was very interested in. And I'd been interested in that since I was very young, when, even going as far back as high school, when I was really not good with women, right? I didn't have good, I guess you could say, male role models in that area. I didn't know what to do. And, it wasn't until college and later that I actually got sort of good at this stuff. And it had to do with a lot of research and development to get there. I really didn't know what was going on. And so I was very curious because to me, it seemed like, you know, not so much the value of a man, but the happiness and satisfaction of a man often depended on how well he was doing in managing his relationships with women. That's kind of seemed to be the case. The guys who were in unhappy marriages or lukewarm, you know, sort of, you could say, average but dissatisfied relationships. Those guys weren't necessarily happy with their lives. Most people were escaping their lives. That's today. Most people escape their lives. They're not really happy. Didn't have a sense of purpose. You know what I mean? Now there's plenty of men out there who had a sense of purpose and a sense of value, who have done various different levels of success or failure with women. A lot of my mentors had a sense of purpose and were very successful in their life and had a terrible track record with women. All right. So that suited a lot of my mentors. But that terrible track record affected their overall happiness and well-being and satisfaction, in different parts of their lives. And it just stands to reason, you know what I mean? Our mating imperative, we have an imperative as a species, which is to mate. That's our strongest biological drive we have. It's even stronger than survival from an evolutionary psychology and biology perspective. So, I mean, given that's the highest drive, if you can't sort that part of your life out, you're probably going to struggle with different or various degrees of unhappiness and probably going to struggle too with your sense of value as a man. Although I do recommend that you separate your value from what a woman thinks and you pursue your own value for the sake of itself, as a man, and that a woman or relationship with women are independent of the value you're pursuing. But most guys don't have that understanding or that education either, and so they're not hearing that message. So most guys, most men today suffer, and they're suffering because they're failing with their relationships. And so I recognize this at a young age. I recognize this early on, and I geared a lot of my understanding and training in psychology towards understanding relationships. But I found that the academic and educational world was lacking in a lot of areas. A lot of horoscope style thinking, like that's when love languages were more popular. I mean, there were counselors, people with counseling degrees and licenses, who were assigning the 5 love languages to couples, when we have research to tell you that the 5 love language thing is bullshit across the board. All right. It has nothing to do with relationship happiness. And so you can always rationalize something to make it fit. You can do that. You can rationalize the 5 love languages to try to make it fit your life. You could also rationalize horoscopes to fit your life too. But that doesn't mean it's objectively true or objectively, useful when it comes to having healthy relationships. And so I really was on a quest to try to figure this stuff out. I I like this. Yeah, I know. That's why I make fun of it every time. Your journey sounds very feminine. Yes, my healing journey. Thank you. Thank you. And it's just so funny. And hey man, good to see you, bro. Thanks for checking in. And and I will say, hey, if you guys got questions, comments, concerns, throw them in the chat. A little super sticker, whatever those goofy things are, a $2 super chat or something. It helps the algorithms, and it'll get your question noticed. But I don't require that. You know what I mean? It's not a big deal. So there's that, right? At any rate, so yeah, so I was on this healing journey. Well, I was on this quest rather to figure this out. And in figuring this out, I talked to a number of couples. When I would see it, they're hard to find. First of all, like, look around you, think of yourself today and people in your social circles, right? And people in your family and people in your neighborhood or business circles. Think about some elderly couples you might know or have come in contact with. All right, people we'll say over the age of 60, 65 years old, who have been in a relationship 20 plus years. So I want you to try to narrow now your thinking towards that. And so how many of those do you even see out in the world? You even see at a church or at farmer's market or mall or store or restaurant, where you can look at them and go, they seem like they were optimally, maximally happy. How many of those do you see? It's not a lot. You're rarely going to come across it. It took me years to sort of find about 20 couples to interview, and it was a very loose interview. It was just a lot of questions and sort of conversations I would have, and I made it a point over years ago. All right, we're talking 15 years ago, trying to figure this stuff out, and I took notes, and I accumulated some data. Now, years later, 2025, part of what I do is I help men in the dating market, and I help everybody, men and women, have healthier, better relationships. And I help people pursue what I call that legacy relationship. So that relationship that would be optimally happy, and part of that narrow percentage that makes it a few decades or longer, right? That makes it for the long haul. And that's, reported high satisfaction through, the life of that relationship. That's what I help guys get. You know what I mean? I'll help you get the girls to get the dates and, date a bunch of different women if that's, that's a stage for a lot of people. But most people grow out of that stage and they want to have something long term that lasts. And so I help people. That's a piece I provide that most Most people can't provide that peace, as well as your own inner game and mindset, and having an elevated um, lifestyle and an elevated state of mind compared to what everything else is doing, and doing actual, like, what does that mean? It's not just changing your thinking, it's changing the way your brain reacts through exercises, through tools, through training. And having success in seduction and in relationship requires training. Okay, it's like learning jujitsu or learning boxing. Okay, or learning how to draw or learning how to write. It's like you have to train yourself. All right, it's a training process of training yourself. And that's what I do with guys now, because it is not natural with the social conditioning we have, coupled with our some of our instincts towards short-term mating and some of the other things. We're not set up for success for long-term relationships. It's something everybody seems to want, but we're not set up for that. And even the people who say, well, they don't really want that, most of that's cap, right? Most of that is coping with the fact that they're lonely, and with the fact that they, are struggling, okay, socially and personally and with close relationships. That, to me, that is the fifth wave of feminism that we're getting into. If you want to look at that, is the loneliness epidemic. That is part of the fifth wave, is that people are going to be replaced by technology, right? Not just in jobs, but in sexual relationships and in close romantic relationships. It won't be a good replacement. It's not going to be effective. Just like notch counts and chasing, clout was never a good replacement for a healthy relationship in a family or whatever. You know what I mean? Um, technological replacement of sex and emotional closeness is going to be even worse of a substitute for a healthy relationship. But that's where the world and social conditioning is going. You don't have to go there. You have a choice to make. If you're watching this, maybe you'll make the right choices. And there's the end of the day, you have instinct on your side. All the women out there who are struggling too, and who have poor behavior, really, because of their struggles, are starving and craving for a guy to come into their lives that can stimulate their mind towards having a healthy long-term relationship. Now, they might not all those women are going to be capable of achieving that goal, at least not without some therapy, with not without some self-growth, right? Because there's a lot of women that are kind of mentally broken out there, and they're not capable of it right now, but they want it, and their desire is there. And all you have to do is stimulate that desire. It's actually really easy when you know the skills, and they won't go for the substitute. Again, they may not be capable of being healthy with you. All right, so that's something to sort. You have to sort that part out, but they're not, it's not going to be without wanting it. All right. Especially if you know how to be desirable and seduce and stimulate that part of her brain. Okay. So, yeah. So I interviewed these 20, roughly about 20. And so here's some limits to the data that I'm going to provide you. All right. This is not a clinical trial. This is not a clinical study. Now, I will point you to Gottman Institute has tried to do research on this, or they've done research on this, talking and interviewing and finding similarities with what healthy couples are doing. The thing about that, though, is there's a lot of things due to social conditioning and what's considered socially appropriate, a lot of topics that aren't breached, a lot of things that aren't, talked about when you're dealing with research. Questions that should be asked that don't get asked, so that's your one limit of the actual data in the studies out there. The second part of the limit is, okay, the people doing that research, let's say with Gottman Institute or whoever it was, whoever created or did research on happy couples over a period of time, there's that research that exists. They're not persuasion experts. They're not experts in human behavior. They're researchers. Why is that important? Well, that's important because the biggest limit of research when we deal with research on sex, as well as, romantic relationships and, modern dating, mating, whatever you want to call it, the biggest limit we have is people don't tell the truth. Okay. So that's not talked about or understood, but self reporting studies are unreliable. You have to somehow vet for the the mental gymnastics and the ego protection and the lies that people will tell when asked these questions in different contexts. And that can be hard to do. And most researchers don't do it. They don't even think about doing it, or if they try it, they might not do it effectively. You know what I mean? There's very little research out there that considers the lies that people tell. There's one a really good study out there that did consider that when they looked at, stated versus revealed preferences in mating, right? In dating behavior. And so that was good because they asked questions that tried to reveal what their behavior was, which and how that differentiated from their stated preference. And you run into, of course, in that research, these differences in stated versus revealed preferences, which means people aren't telling the truth. You know what I'm saying? Particularly women. Okay. Do not, particularly high level when you looked at the women versus the men on these studies, is they are not, they tend to say, oh, this is what I want. And this is what's important to me. But then their behavior shows something different. So their revealed preferences are not what they're saying. So there's this thing where people say things that they don't mean and don't believe and aren't true in studies. And so when I'm interviewing these couples, knowing this, especially the more advanced I got in understanding persuasion, you get good at being able to tell when people are bullshitting, and you get good at being able to tell. And it's not because they're trying to lie to you or they're trying to be liars. It's just that people protect their egos, they protect their worldview, or they want to tell a story that fits their identity and worldview that may not always match objective reality or truth, right? So that's a part of the human condition. So you realize people lie across the board. That's just what they do. And you learn how to ask the right questions and sort of, navigate through that. And so I trust, even though it's very anecdotal and not really well executed, because I didn't think about doing it for research. I just was more curious and wanting to know. And so over a series of a few years, I was interviewing couples that were elderly couples when I would find that opportunity. You know what I mean? And it was hard to find those opportunities, but so there's limits because it's not like it was done with the standard where I had a list of questions and I had a control, mechanisms, and I kept things consistent like that. That unfortunately it doesn't fit for a research paper, but it's still very useful information. And I trust this information a little bit better than somebody's research, unless somebody can show me in that research how they vetted out for people not telling the truth. See, so and if there's research out there that interviewed healthy couples, happy couples who were rated at a high level of happiness, not just through their opinions, but revealed, not just stated. So there was a way for them to sort out whether they're telling the truth or not. Okay. I use sexual behavior as a way to sort that out. My opinion is that healthy couples who are very happy are having sex with each other pretty frequently. And the ones that are not as happy are not. I mean, that seems to be true. And a lot of people want to, say otherwise, which I find hilarious because we all know the truth. I feel like, you know what I mean? That's one way through relationships to sort out the lies from the truth. Okay. Because if you're if you're if you're in an intimate relationship and you're not being intimate, well, then that would stand to reason that the quality of that intimate relationship isn't there, right? So even if they report, I'm happy with my husband, I'm happy with my wife, you might be happy, but the quality of your relationship is down. And I think the happiness you report is a cope, not really true, if you're not having intimacy in your relationship. So there are ways and ways of asking questions and talking about these things with people and getting them to reveal things without offending them or upsetting them, and also getting through or cutting through um the true stuff, the what's objectively true, and and sorting that out. And then I was able to do that, I think, more effectively than maybe a lot of researchers, even though the research would be more consistent. So take it for what it is. But this laid the foundation. What I found out from interviewing these couples laid the foundation, which would later be my roadmap that I give people to having successful relationships. And it's working, by the way. It's working. Okay, so I have had thousands of men I've coached at this point, and several, not thousands of women, but quite a few women and quite a few couples that I've been able to take to happy high levels in their relationships, where their probability of, I mean, they're still alive, right? So who knows, right? But their probability of having long-term success, until somebody finally takes a dirt nap, you know what I mean, is much, much, much higher than the average because of the work they've done. And so I have experience in this now, and talking with these couples led to revealing these things. And that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. So, we're going to go through all that. I should mention, okay, a couple things, and I got to do a video to show you guys what I mean. But my material, because of the nature of my material, is algorithmically suppressed. We could call it shadow banned, but it's not a personal thing with YouTube against me. It's just the nature of the topics I talk about, and sometimes the way in which I talk about them could lead to algorithmic suppression. I'm sorting out how to, give a message that doesn't trigger those algorithms in a negative way. But it's, they're not giving me the answers. There's no cheat code there. So in the meantime, I struggle with algorithmic help. All right. So, which means that the messages I give, like this message today, could save people a lot of, maybe save their life. Like just this one stream we're going to do today, talking about what I'm going to talk about, could save someone's life and could save someone's relationship, and probably will, but it won't. I'll be lucky to reach 1,000 views over the next month, which is sad. You know what I mean? So we need to help more people help themselves to have better outcomes in life. You can do that with a like, with a subscribe, with a comment. Okay, all those things to help me fight through algorithmic suppression. All right, so please do that. That's what I ask of you for my time and effort that I put into you, helping you for free on these platforms. And speaking of free, I got my community, and if you're not in it, you should be in there. I would like to hit 1,000 in the community by January, but I mean, I probably am in front of, between Instagram and here, I probably reach, not a huge reach, but maybe 30,000 or so people a week. And yet I'm not quite at 1,000 in the community, which tells me a lot of you guys are just not taking advantage of a free resource that you could use to help yourself. All right. Getting us off these platforms, as useful as they are, and being able to have real conversations and for you to have some accountability without having it cost you anything, is the key to you being successful. You know what I mean? And yet that tells me, unfortunately, a lot of you guys aren't really that invested in your success, and that's too bad. But hopefully you're different and you're listening to this and you want to actually invest at least some effort and time into your own success. And that's what, you should be a member of my community, the free stuff. I have coaching programs that cost money, but being in the community and being able to have conversations and start a process of accountability, that stuff's free and you should be there. And I have a course coming soon too, called the Psychopaths Playbook, which is to teach normal people how to tap into some of the traits that some of the dark triad people have that makes them successful. It's not to make you a psychopath, but it's to allow you to stop losing. Because a lot of you guys are great guys, you're great people, and you mean well, and you're just fucking losing. Okay. And it's because you're not tapping into certain parts of your brain that you need to tap into to be a little bit more relentless, a little bit more ruthless, Okay. A little bit more forward thinking, planning, calculated, even charming. All right. And all kinds of things that you're not doing that you need to develop. And that's what that course is going to help out with. Don't know when I'm dropping it yet, but you'll get the announcement in my community if you get there. So that's what you need to do. Okay, cool. All right, let's keep going. Um, yeah, so thanks for asking, Erkin. If you go to the description of the video, here's after I talk about what's in the video, okay? A little chat GPT help to tell me what to say there, to SEO optimize the video. Below that, there's a couple of links you can click. One is to follow me on Instagram, one is to join the community, and one is to buy an alpha mindset course. So hit the join the community link there, and you'll put in some information like your email address and I think a couple of qualifying questions. And then that's it, man. You're in the community and you can post. So that's that. Thank you for asking. Okay. So cool. Now let's go over this. Okay. So I asked this, question. I asked a lot of different questions, just talked with these people. And there's a number of things I figured out, and I'll cut to the chases, and we'll go through a list of things too. A list of similarities I found that go counter. They're very counterintuitive to what the dating market teaches, which is why my material can be considered controversial. But I'm not talking out of my asshole here. I'm talking from, evidence of people who are successful. Look, your probability of success in anything is low. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Okay. It's a lower percentage of men out there who are jacked and healthy. Okay. There's a lower percentage of men out there who are doing well in their jobs or their business or their vocation. In fact, if you're going to start a business, your probability of failure is something like in the 90s, 95, 96%, something like that. It's crazy high rate of failure for people who start a business. Yet people do it all the time and are successful, right? So what do you have to do to be successful? Let's say if you're going to start a business, you have to look at what the successful people are doing, and you have to look at what the people who fail at business did, and you have to not do what the people who failed did, and you have to do what the successful people did, right? Like that's kind of the roadmap there. The starting point at the very least is learning what works and what doesn't by looking at evidence. And that's not just statistical, but it's statistical is not even that important because again, so what if 96, 97% of businesses fail? If you do what the 3% or so did to succeed, then it doesn't matter that everybody else failed. You see what I mean? That's why statistics actually don't matter as much as the anecdotal evidence and stories, because when you get into anecdotal scenarios, you learn the details of what made something work or what didn't, so I'm not saying statistics aren't important, but these anecdotal stories, learning the lessons is more important. Okay. Well, guess what? And I've done some videos on this, but your relationship outcomes are pretty abysmal too. All right. I mean, it's only getting worse. So that doesn't matter though, because you who's watching this can be successful. If you do whatever the number is, whether it's 5% or 14%, I figured in a previous video, 14%. At the best rate we have, best case scenario is 14% of married people can be successful in an LTR or a marriage, which is not good numbers, right? But it's probably less than 14%. I go over that in those previous videos, so I won't revisit it. But let's say 5-10% success. Okay. How are you going to become that 5%, that 10% that can do well in their relationships, be happy, and have their relationships not suck the life out them so that they can't do other things in life, right? Like, how can you be a part of that? Well, we got to look at what worked and what didn't. And my material and what I teach in my courses is based off of that. Like, so when I coach people and when I have you guys and I give you guys advice, I take what's called a results-based approach. I don't care about the argument. I care about the results. You can reason and logic your way into destruction if you want to, but that's not going to fucking help you. You know what I mean? There's ways of arguing and reasoning into just about anything. Ask somebody who believes in a crazy idea, that, some flat earther or something, right? Like, no offense to flat earthers, because you got to say no offense now. We never use targets a group, but really though, right? Like, you got wild ideas that people logic and reason out based off of things that aren't true, but it doesn't really matter. And they have these worldviews, these beliefs. But is that going to help you succeed or get anything you want? Not really, not by itself. Okay. You have to take a results based approach, not just what fits objective reality and what the reasoning is and what the argument is, but what is the argument that is also going to give me the success that I'm looking for, allow me to reach the goals, allow me to get the win. You know what I mean? That's the questions you need to ask too. All right. And so I take a results based approach when I'm coaching people. And so when I have things and material and skill sets for people to develop, skill sets in sexual psychology, seduction, for example, why do I have that material? Why do I talk about seduction and sex? All right. It's because I'm a weird pervert. So I'm going to talk about sex all the time. No, it's because I know for a fact, based on a lot of evidence, that sexual satisfaction and desire is a key to happiness. And if you don't know how to create that as a man, you're going to suffer in all your relationships. I also know that most people are having bad sex out there, and most men are bad at it. Okay. That's also statistically true. So why, and women aren't telling the truth about those things, and guys are ego protecting and not facing the reality of where their shortcomings are, and not learning seduction skills, not learning how to be attractive to a woman. And so guys across the board are turning women off in the bedroom and then complaining because their wives or girlfriends don't want to have sex with them after a period of time. You know what I mean? And then they're getting dumped, or they're having to dump somebody. It's just this vicious cycle. So that's just one example. Like, okay, why do I focus on sex? It's not just because I'm this horny, weird guy who wants everybody to be fucking everybody. Like, it's not about that. It's because I know that if you want to be happy and have good relationship outcomes, you have to have good sex in your relationships, and you have to maintain that sexual relationship. That has to be a high priority. That I'm not pulling that out of my ass. I'm telling you that because that's what successful people do in their relationships. And the ones that fail don't fucking do that. Like, that's what it is. You know what I mean? But no, people think they know everything, so they don't want to listen all the time. All right. So people are throwing their anecdotes into the chat, and I think that's great. You know what I mean? And so cool, and if that's true, and if they're not full of shit, then great. 58th wedding anniversary. Now, to have parents to provide that role model for you, that's a really good thing. Most people don't have that. So good for you to have grown up with that, provided it's, you're also not, that you're being truthful to yourself, and that they're being truthful to how they present themselves to the world. And I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say that that's all true. Great. You know what I mean? Like, 58th wedding anniversary, still happy in love. That means that you have a good role model, a good example to look at, and probably a good set of habits, maybe, that could lead you to success later on if you don't let the world beat you down. You know what I mean? So that's good, man. But let's go through some of these things. So, in a general sense, the biggest problem we have is misplaced priorities. So 2025, the difference between relationships that are successful for 20 plus years versus the ones that aren't, or that the priorities are misplaced for the ones that aren't. And for those of you in the dating market, and for women out there, especially, who are the selectors in the dating market, their priorities are misplaced. And they don't even realize their priorities are misplaced. And that is why they're failing. If I could sum it up, that's probably what it is. We'll talk about what those priorities are. But in a general sense, it's the priorities that people have for transactional relationships. How tall is he? Is he good looking? Is he in shape? What kind of money does he make? You know what I mean? And we start going, does he want this? Does he want, going down a checklist of things that are not that important. Really, they're just not. And guys, you do it too. You all have your little checklists of things that you expect somebody to meet, you know? And that's what I call a transactional list. Has very little to do with meaningful priorities. There's transactional priorities and there's meaningful priorities, things that are meaningful, the things that matter if you're going to last 20 plus years, and the people who lasted that long, guess how many of these old ladies talked about how tall their husband was, or their talked about their husband's height, for example, as being important. Guess how many out of the ones I interviewed? It's like big fat zero, right? Guess how many talked about like the transactional items that people come up with that they think is important for vetting out in the dating market? None of those things are important. You know what I mean? They add up to a total picture of a person, but that's not the things that they would pinpoint. You know what I mean? And that's not the trends in their behavior that would make them successful. So we want to look at meaningful priorities, not transactional ones. Now, some of those transactional ones may fit into the meaningful priorities in a certain way, but by itself, it's like that's not what it is. Like, so for example, let's say a girl is looking at a guy who makes a decent living. He makes in like the low 100,000, right, a year, and then there's another guy that makes like 300,000. Okay, those two things will not matter for the long-term success of that relationship. They won't, right? One guy being a multimillionaire and another guy having just enough. Maybe he'll have $1 million before he dies, but it's really just enough to have a comfortable life. Won't have any bearing on anything. But yet the internet says that stuff's really important. It's actually not important. And I'm not saying you shouldn't make millions of dollars. Go for it. I'm helping guys do that too in the community, right? By helping with their inner game and their goal setting and their discipline and their relentlessness and their priorities, all those things that you need, right? To scale your wealth. So I'm all about it, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that that's what makes the difference. It doesn't. It makes zero difference. Okay. All the things you guys think is important to a girl, it doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean? And so all that stuff is social conditioning to lead you to nihilistic thinking and to think that you can't be successful in the dating market. And then to not hone the other things that should be your priorities. That's all it is. Because we're not in it. As I've said before in previous videos, I went over my sort of history of, all the waves of feminism last week. The social conditioning doesn't fit healthy relationships and families anymore. It actually fits you being anxious, depressed, unhappy, alone. That is better for the economy right now than you being in a happy relationship with a woman that you're going to stay with for the next 20, 30, 50 years. So social conditioning is not going to point you there. All right. So what are these people doing? What is it more? So what meaningful priorities? You want to look at three things. Okay. Three things: desire, compatibility, and capability. All right. Those are the three broad categories. Now, desire could fall into a number of things, but luckily for you guys, especially for me, because I don't see anyone knocking down my door, all right, to make me a supermodel anytime soon, right? So, like, especially for the rest of us guys who are not in the 1% of good looking guys who belong in Hollywood or in a magazine, all right? The rest of us, okay, lucky for us, women can be maximally desired to men who don't fit that 1% of good looking. And they do it all the time. So luckily our behavior and the way that we show up and other characteristics we have, like dominance, masculinity, things like that, can be more attractive than sheer appearance or looks. Okay. Women, unfortunately, for men, do prioritize your looks more than women prioritize the looks of men. But it's not about that per se. Of course, maximize your looks, but don't think if you're a guy who's short, you can't get a girl to love you. Like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? Or if your face doesn't look like it belongs in a magazine, that you can't get a girl to love you. It's all bullshit to think that way. All right. Desire is something that's built through experiences. All you have to do, she just has to like you enough to go on a date with you. And then from that point, you can seduce her into having high sexual experiences, high intimacy, and great experiences with you. And having those great experiences with you, and that emotional closeness, that intimacy, and those high sexual experiences with you, okay, having a bunch of orgasms, all right, that are more intense than she's ever had before with you, trust me, she won't care that you're not a guy who could be in a modeling magazine. All right. And that's the reality of it. And she gets there because you're good enough to go on a date with. Meeting the criteria for being good enough to go on a date with is a lot easier to meet than, oh, I have to be the best looking guy in the whole fucking, you know, city that I live in, and you live in Chicago or Miami or something. Like, no, dude, like, that's not what it is. All right. Once again, misplaced priorities. You guys are putting your priorities where they don't belong. All right. So desire is one of the key characteristics. Without desire and maximal desire, it will not work. Okay. So you have to maximize that. That gets maximized through your behavior and your skill sets, your skills in seduction, your skills in communication, your skills in creating a good experience for the other person, whether you're going out and having an elaborate date or whether you're just hanging out and going for a drive and watching a show on fucking Amazon Prime or something with some popcorn. Are you able to create a great experience? That's a skill set. And you guys need to develop that skill set. Okay. Because that is what's going in skill set in the bedroom as well. And skill set of getting into her emotional centers and areas of her mind, getting her to be able to open up and feel comfortable with you and be able to connect with you. These are the things that create desire. And if you don't have the skill in doing that, you're going to suffer. Too many of you are focused on other things that you can't change instead of worrying about what's important. And too many women out there, you will never hear a woman on the internet almost mention any of those fucking things. She's going to mention a bunch of transactional items versus how her brain and her body could be seduced. You know what I mean? She's not going to give you the cheat code on how to seduce her. She's going to mention a bunch of shit that doesn't matter. And unfortunately for these women, too many of them are out there focused on those things that don't matter and missing opportunities with guys that would be excellent matches for them. They're missing opportunities, focusing on the wrong things. That's why beautiful women today can't be happy and can't get in these long-term relationships because they're focused on bullshit instead of what matters. So desire is a key component. Compatibility. So I have an exercise that I have guys do to vet out whether a girl would be compatible or not. That's lifestyle, personal values, and kind of like your ideas and stuff about the world, right? These things are really important. I've seen, I've had a couple of guys who are going through breakups right now. They were in good relationships with the wrong woman is what it boils down to. They're, one, maybe she's a single, having a great relationship with somebody who's a single mom and a little bit older than he is. And he's not, he's just not, doesn't fit the lifestyle he wants. And he started dating her casually because he wanted and liked her, and then found himself in a relationship, and then he finds himself having to break up. That happens all the time because compatibility isn't there. They weren't really compatible with their life goals and experiences and values. Do you know what I mean? I have another guy, same kind of thing, where, he wants a certain lifestyle and she wants to focus on a different thing. And they're just not a good match in that regard. And then now they got geographically separated because of those differences in priorities. And hey, they like each other. The desire is there, but the compatibility is just not, right? And so that's okay. That's when you say, like, I love you, you're great. We had great experiences together, but we're going to move on with our lives, not be in a relationship together, right? But you can vet out for that compatibility early and choose to bond with somebody and build desire with somebody who you're compatible with early. Okay. Instead of, getting into it with somebody because you desire them and then find, just finally looking at the fact that you're not compatible a year or two later, now that you have an emotional attachment. That's not the best way to approach. You know what I mean? Because then you miss opportunities with people you could have made work, you could have had a better relationship with. Maybe you're wasting somebody's time. Women have a fertility window that can get wasted on the wrong guy. Well, what's the wrong guy? A lot of times the wrong guy is somebody who's just not compatible with them, and they have no way of vetting out or sorting out that compatibility, because the modern world is not talking about that per se. They're talking about these transactional items and things and what do I bring to the table and all that bullshit that doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter because if you're not compatible in your values, your lifestyle, your beliefs, your direction, your goals, you can't be together. It doesn't matter what they bring to the table. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's being missed. Not even being talked about, not even being sorted through in the dating phase of the relationship, right? Before the commitment. And then there's the third thing, which is capability. So many people are mentally or emotionally broken, or their ideas about how the world should work is so screwed up that they're not capable of having a happy or healthy relationship. And you could have all the desire in the world and a lot of in high compatibility with somebody, but if they can't, let's say if they're a toxic communicator and they refuse to fix it, let's say they're arrogant, let's say they hold grudges, they don't have forgiveness, they're unable to be great, they don't have gratitude for the things that they have, they hold grudges, they exhibit the four horsemen of toxic communication. You know what I mean? They devalue who they're with as their unhappiness that exists inside of them grows. These sorts of things, these are not capable people of having good relationships, right? Or perhaps maybe their bonding mechanisms are damaged from trauma or previous sexual behavior. They're not going to be happy. They're going to be bored and they're going to lose desire quickly with the guy that they're with. Many women do this, okay? These are incapable people. So, one of the dumbest things you can do, and I know because I'm guilty, okay? I've done this before, is you pursue a relationship for somebody who you desire and she desires you back, and it seems like you're compatible, but you're not vetting for capability. So for my mastermind guys, I have a questionnaire, a personality testing or assessment, where if they're dating somebody, they can assess them for capability. It uses the Hexaco model of personality assessing mixed in with dark triad psychological testing. It's not a diagnostic tool, but it's a tool for guys to use that's quick and easy. And a guy can go through use that tool. And if a girl scores poorly on that tool, then the girl they're dating, they know she's not capable until she can't score well on that test, because the way the test is designed, she's not going to be somebody who's going to be capable of having a legacy long-term relationship. So she's recreational use only. You know what I mean? And probably better to not even go that far, because you will get attached to her and the sex you're having and the fun you're having. And then when she starts to devalue you and affect your life in a negative way, you probably won't leave her and you're going to have a problem. That's just what happens for most of you guys. You lie to yourselves, you say it's not going to happen. Happens all the time. Right? And so these are the things: desire, ability, compatibility, and capability. Women aren't even talking about that shit, very, very loosely. They have these checklists of things that have nothing to do with that. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the problem, you know? So that's in a general sense. Now I'm going to keep going through this. Now I'll jump into another aspect of this. Okay. So here's another thing that nobody really wants to admit or talk about, because we're really in that kind of we're in an interesting time, because we're in we exist right now in 2025 in two extremes. One extreme is incel, both male and female incel behavior and loneliness. And then the other extreme is high promiscuity. All right. So we exist in these two extremes of high promiscuity and incel and loneliness behavior. Women are doing this, not just men. And so women will have these extremes of blowing through a bunch of guys and then taking a long break and feeling depressed and feeling like, what am I doing? And then not be with a guy for several months. Or women will mate switch, get into a relationship and blow it up within a year, and then do that again, like, have that serial monogamy, and then go into female incel behavior for several months. Like, it's like we're so unhappy now, we can't sort ourselves out. That's what's happening right now. Well, as it turns out, from interviewing these elderly couples, sexual history shapes your ability to bond, right? And so I didn't sit there and ask every couple, what was your notch count? All right. Like, I didn't have the balls to do that. And it wasn't, I mean, I always have the balls to do it. Let's be honest. I'm kind of a dick, but it didn't fit the social circumstance with talking to these elderly couples, just to ask some old lady how many dudes she boinked. You know what I mean? Seemed a little strange to ask that, but I would ask questions that would allude to what their sexual behavior would be like. You know what I mean? Well, did you do a lot of dating when you were younger? Well, how long were you single, and how did you approach dating? And you know what I mean? Well, I mean, and I'd ask, like, how did you approach your sexual experiences, like, before marriage? Again, not direct notch count questions. Okay. But just like asking stuff about sex. I definitely ask those questions because I know how important it is. And a pretty high trend was there was not this promiscuous behavior from the women. Okay. A few of the guys had their periods of womanizing, but not all of them. That was not even like the majority of guys either. But there were a few guys who, like, okay, they were kind of like the womanizer a little bit. Then they met, and it's usually an age gap too. They met the woman they're with, who was like 5 to 10 years younger or something. And then they settled down. You know what I mean? So that was common. A lot of guys played around a little bit, or at least tried to, and settled down. The girls did not play around like that. But it's not to say they never had casual experiences, because they certainly did. But it was not to the degree and the level that we see today. All right. And so that's what nobody really wants to talk about. And I'm not trying to moralize it or make it a religious thing or a moral thing. But you can even look at peer reviewed data and real world results on this. If you ask elderly couples, 20 of them who've been together 20 plus years, what their sexual history would look like, okay, they're not going to tell you that they ran through 100 people in their 20s and now they settle down. That just was not happening. All right. So I'm not saying it can't ever happen. I'm not saying, but it's a fact that if you're practicing, if you're practicing short-term mating and conditioning your brain to respond to that, then it's going to be very difficult to convert all of your sexual and emotional responses to long-term mating, particularly if you're a woman. The reason why, and this is my reason why I think that from a neurological perspective, is that men attach with vasopressin and women don't. So everybody attaches with beta endorphin, but you'll attach to a long-term friendship with beta endorphin. That's not what's going to differentiate it between a romantic and a non-romantic relationship. Okay. Beta endorphin is like that comfort thing. All right. And it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. What makes or differentiates a long-term relationship from sexual and non-sexual is not the beta endorphin. It's the sexual feelings, of course, and the dopamine and the stimulating that desire. Okay. But it's that oxytocin afterwards that happens post orgasm, post sex, and post cuddling and post other things too. But the highest bump you get in oxytocin is during after sex, right? Particularly after orgasm. So, if a woman's primary bonding mechanism when it comes to the desire portion and feeling that emotional and sexual desire closeness to the guy they're with, their primary neurochemical for that is oxytocin. That is stimulated, most prominently through sex, and that goes away quickly the more variety of partners you have sexually. You know what I mean? This is why when a girl is a virgin and she has sex for the first time, she remembers that guy, because that's generally a gigantic oxytocin dump for her. If she goes through 20 more guys, she forgot. Guy number 11, she might not even remember. You see what I'm saying? Not as impacting on the oxytocin system. By the time she gets to you to marry you, and she's 29 years old, let's say, and she has 22 people she slept with, which isn't even high numbers nowadays. What do you think's happened to that system? Right? She's not getting that oxytocin experience with you. Not the same as if she only had, let's say, 3 or 4 sexual partners and they were all in the context of a relationship, right? She's not getting that same oxytocin stimulus from you. And to maintain that stimulus, you being the same person or partner, right? That's going to be harder to do. So it's just a neurological thing. And women don't like it because they want to go have hoe phases and have no accountability. But the reality is that the more you do that, particularly as a woman, because of oxytocin, the harder it is to bond over time. It's just the way it is. You're conditioning your system. I'm not saying you can't condition it the other way, but do you have a roadmap for that? Anybody listening? Can you point to some research? Can you point to something that has a roadmap for repairing the damage to your oxytocin system from high notches? Anybody out there? No, there isn't that. I have ideas, and I certainly could work with somebody to try to help that along. And they're pretty good ideas. Okay. They're pretty good answers, but I'm not going to make promises that I don't have any research to back up. I can't tell a girl who's been through 100 dudes that she can do some work with me and then she'll be fixed and now be able to be happy with one guy. With high probability, though, with persuasion, hypnosis, and a number of mental tools, we could maybe do that, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of work, probably work she's not willing to do. And that girl you're dating who's been through 100 guys, good luck to you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to jump on the whole like virgin bandwagon stuff, like, because there's plenty of girls who claim to be virgins who would be terrible relationship companions. So I'm not trying to moralize this or make this a thing. This is just what I found. This is why I'm like, I don't think running through a bunch of dudes as a girl is a good thing. Now, why are guys different? Well, I know this is controversial still, but guys are biologically different than women. Isn't that crazy? But it's true. Okay. And so particularly with how we bond, I don't know why the fuck this isn't talked about as often, but once again, I guess we'll suppress this algorithmically. Don't tell the truth out there. All right. Guys bond with vasopressin as much as they do with oxytocin. Vasopressin is more of a caretaking, protective sort of reaction. Okay. Women get vasopressin for kids. Guys get the vasopressin for the woman they're with. This is why a guy can go through a bunch of casual women who stimulate oxytocin because they have sex with them, but they don't stimulate that vasopressin in the same way. And then they get into a long-term relationship with somebody that they fall for, who stimulates that vasopressin system, that need to want to protect and care for a woman. And now the guy's in love with her. Okay. So that's why it works different for men. And I'm not saying it's healthy for guys to run through hundreds of women. It's not really healthy. Okay. But it's less damaging. A guy who's been through, let's say, 22 women, he's 29 years old, settling down or something. Okay. He's less likely to be damaged from his experiences than a woman who's done that. It's the reality of it, guys. You don't like the reality, don't shoot the messenger. Okay. This is just it. And women who happen to come across this information and who are listening and getting upset because you're the person who's been through 22 guys, I mean, don't give up. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't have the data or research. It doesn't mean that you can't change it. But I know one thing's for sure. If you don't at least recognize the reality that you're in, and if these women and a woman you're with does not recognize that, okay, I'm in a reality that I've not been conditioning myself for success for a long-term relationship. So if I want to have that success, I got to change my behavior, change my beliefs, and I got to actually do some training with my brain, okay, in order to change how I respond to desire. A woman who's been through a bunch of notches and who wants to make it long-term with a guy, she can't pull the shit that these frigid wives pull when they, don't feel like sex and the sex drops off. She doesn't have, no, I don't think anyone has the luxury to do that, but she especially does not. She has to actively become a sex servant to the man she's with. Seriously, because that's going to stimulate her oxytocin. She's got to have a mindset of free use sexual relationship in the relationship she's in if she expects it to last. And it's not even just about pleasing the man, although that would be nice if it was just about that, but it's actually about stimulating her own brain to stimulate the oxytocin. Because if she lets that sex drop off, that oxytocin is not going to stay at these higher levels. She won't feel this love or care towards her guy she's with. She'll be bored with the guy. This girl who's been through 22, 25 guys, if she's not maintaining, and if you're not maintaining as a man, a good sexual relationship, both in frequency as well as quality, okay, forget it. Like, she's going to get bored with you quickly. And her brain is going to stimulate her to mate switch because she's been doing the whole time, right? So these people who did last, though, 20, 30, 50 years, guess what? They don't have these high notches. They were, some of the women did have like periods, but their period, like, you're talking to an old lady, she's talking about a promiscuous period in her life. That's because she slept with like 2 guys within 6 months. That would be considered promiscuous for her. You know what I mean? Like, the standards, with some of these elderly people that I talk to, in some cases, like as far back as 15 years ago, geez, you know what I mean? In some case, their standards for what they would consider promiscuous, right, was way different than today. But it stands to reason, like, you have to, so girls who are single and right now and looking for a relationship, they got to start thinking a little differently. And you guys need to start thinking differently too. You guys, I know a lot of women will sleep with you on the first date, but you guys can't be just hunting for that, because you're just going to be narrowing yourself down to basically 304s. You know what I mean? It's going to be very, I'm not shaming anyone who's had a first date. Hell, in my relationship, the first time we met, we went straight to the bedroom. We had been talking for a little bit, but that's what happened. But you know what? From there, it's been working out well. So I'm not going to sit here and say it can't work out. But there's a lot of guys out there who are dating who are like, oh, if she's not, I know, like, you got these dumb ideas, guys. Like, oh, she slept with Chad on the first date, so she doesn't sleep with me on the first date, I'm going to next her. Like, dude, all right, you're an idiot. Okay, you're dumb. All right, because if a woman made bad choices and she's trying to make better choices. I'm not saying wait, 6 months to sleep with her or something crazy, but I'm like, give a girl a little time for God's sakes. You know what I mean? If she's trying to make better choices, support that. Okay? If she's trying to be LTR material, that's a good sign, not a bad sign. You know what I'm saying? And so it just, you guys need to square away your thinking. Once again, you guys out there are thinking about the wrong things too, and that's why you're failing. All right. Um, so I'll walk you through some more things as we go along. Let me look at the chats here. Um, going back to the beginning. Okay. Yeah, man. Good to catch you live here too. All right. Good to catch all you guys live. All right, here we go. I've been married for over 20 years, and all of my buddies who are unhappy in marriage, there's one consistent thing: failure to lead. Yeah, I would agree there. Failure to lead, forgot the comma. I got you. I agree with you there. Okay. Well, and this is an example of misplaced priorities. A lot of these women are now asking themselves, because their egos are inflated by simps, right? They're not asking themselves, what do I need to do to get the guy that, meets a high standard for myself? You know, you got these mid level, unattractive, both in behavior and looks, women trying to go for these top tier men. And they're not even bringing, they're not even acting like the women who could be with a man like that. It's ridiculous. But not to mention their priorities are misplaced. 6 figures, 6 feet, six pack does not fucking matter. It really doesn't, you know? And again, finances do matter, but it's not a particular number. You know what I mean? It's enough to be comfortable and happy. There's plenty of women who've been with, and in my interview too, there's a couple of cases where the guy wasn't the primary breadwinner even for a period in the relationship, at least. You know what I mean? There's one circumstance where the guy went back to school to become an attorney or something. Yeah, it was an attorney, and she supported him while he was in school. You know what I mean? And he was like a stay-at-home dad for a period. Relationship still lasted. They were 30 plus years together. You know what I mean? So it's not about money. Women are looking at the wrong things. Um, no, I did not. I told you that. I didn't comply with academic standards because, you know what I mean? It wasn't the goal. I was more curious. And then as I got into it, it's like, okay, but so I'm just sharing. But again, I'm going to trust my anecdotal stuff here more than a lot of the research. Most of the research backs up what I'm saying, though. That's another thing. So I'm not saying anything too controversial from the research. It's just that the research is missing things too. The research isn't going to talk about previous sexual behavior. There's other research that correlates previous sexual behavior with relationship success or failure, but the research talking with long-term, couples who've been together for a long time, that research isn't really asking about their sexual history, from what I know. And these are gaps. These are problems in the research, right? Let's see, David. What's up, David? David Dodge Digital. Man, look out. Been married for 41 years. She was a Proverbs 31 girl, and I also walked away from her when my career took a dive. We kept in touch and realized we're better together than apart. Okay, so this is one thing that's important to mention. I'm glad you mentioned it, is that going through a trial was pretty common. Most of these long-term relationships went through a period where they thought they're not going to make it. A lot of times that would happen in the beginning after a honeymoon phase. Sometimes it happened during the relationship with some sort of life interruption. In David's case here, it was, is when his career took a dive. That happens, or there was two circumstances. Well, I'll talk about this in a little bit, but two circumstances where cheating happened and they got through it. It was on the guy side both times. No cheating on the girl side from anyone I interviewed. and they still got through it though. So some infidelity there. There was some dabbling with emotional infidelity, but no sexual infidelity on the woman's side that had happened during different periods, but they ended up getting through it. You know what I mean? So there's a myth that like, that you're not going to go through problems. You're not going to have to endure through problems. That's a myth. If you want something to work and you guys are high desire, compatible, and capable, and you've made that choice, it can be worth it to work through these trials. In our day and age today, though, right? Everything is all, well, I'm going to swipe and click to the next thing, right? So our short attention span mindset that people have now, they're quick to discard relationships now. And that's a mistake. Okay. Cause sometimes you should, it's funny. A lot of times people are not quick enough to discard bad relationships, but they're quick to discard potentially good ones. That's a pattern that I see now. And it's interesting. Christian, yes. Is the community good for someone in their 30s who's trying to start from zero? Yeah, fucking yes, dude. Of course. You're exactly the guy who should be in there. All right. Now I have people in the community from their 20s, mid 20s. I don't have anybody really in their early 20s too much. I mean, I might have somebody in the community who's just a lurker, but as far as anyone in like the coaching, there are a couple guys in the mid 20s. Most guys are in their 30s or 40s. And I've had guys in their 50s and 60s go through. I had one guy who was 70 years old, coach with me. I had guys who was 70 years old get into a relationship with like an awesome chick. And I haven't talked to him in a long time now because it was a couple years ago. And he was fucking good. You know what I mean? He coached with me for a little bit. It was like a cold approach scenario. And he met this woman who was like, I think she was a little bit younger, but I mean, she was an older too, but attractive for him. And they got into like this relationship, and they're like a leg, as far as I know, unless I get a different report, legacy relationship, like founded at 70. So, I mean, really, this is designed for anybody. And if you just got zeroed out, you're starting over, dude, that's the best time to start doing things different. You now have more motivation and more pain than ever to really change what you're doing. You know what I mean? And to set yourself up. Christian, this is everybody. When you're zero and you're starting over, I don't care if you're 30 or 70, the things you do and the decisions you make over the next 6 months to a year could frame the next decade for you. Really. When you're at scratch and you're having to restart something, whether it's a breakup, a career loss, some major impact in your life, illness, injury, who knows, right? Loss of a family member, some financial loss, whatever it is, that is the time to focus in and do a ton of work and maximize all that pain you have to making changes from the inner game out to your behavior. Because the things you do from the next 6 months, the decisions you make will impact the next decade, if not the rest of your life. So like now is the time to take it serious. So yeah, get into the fucking community. Okay. But do more than that too. You know what I mean? Really start to think about what you're doing for the next 6 months to a year, because that is going to frame everything. And whether you find yourself 2, 3, 5 years from now stuck and still fucked up, or whether you find yourself in a really good place, it's going to be determined by what you do right now. Okay. It goes for everybody. Okay. And I answered that earlier. Where's the community? It's a link in the description, right? You got that. Cool. And then just want to notice that Bears parents celebrated their 58th wedding anniversary, and they're in love. So congratulations. Yeah, dude. Income was not that relevant. I mean, there were a couple though that I would consider poor, dude, to be real. It had more to do with their lifestyle and their expectations. Do you know what I mean? The poor couple that what I would consider them poor. They really didn't have a whole lot, but they didn't care. Like they were okay with that. There's a couple that would, you know, be at what I would consider poverty level or just above poverty level, but they that wasn't their concern. That wasn't their concern. Their focus was just on being happy, and they didn't need to spend a lot of money to do that. And so they had struggles. They had financial struggles in life, which isn't good. Okay, but those struggles did not impact how they treated each other and how they pacted together to solve problems. Do you know what I mean? See, a financial struggle is a struggle in your life, but whether that impacts your relationship or not, that's up to you and the person you're with. You know what I mean? Do you both handle the financial struggle in a way that's productive and without blame and finger pointing and guilt tripping and you know what I mean? And being a fucking asshole to the person you're with? Or do you work? Do you work with as a guy? You're with a woman. Let's say you take a big fat loss and you got to pull back on the expenses and she has to suffer and you don't want to see her suffer and it really sucks. Let's say that happens. Is she going to be a supportive companion or is she going to be a bitch who makes, drifts off and, gets resentful towards you because of something that, you know what I mean? Like, what's her coping strategy? That's what matters more than how much money you make. You know what I mean? Because think about it. You can make several $100,000 a year, be a multimillionaire, but some changes in life cause you to take a small loss, causes that woman who's, let's say, wealthy with you to have to adjust her life. What's her reaction? Resentfulness or compassion and care and wanting to work things out with you. You see what I mean? And a lot of women are being taught all the wrong things, and their reaction is not going to be to work with this guy. You know what I mean? Into solving a problem and to handling hardship together. Most women today are not looking at hardship as something to as an opportunity to get closer to the guy they're with in order to handle and overcome that hardship. They're instead busy being ungrateful because there's hardship. And I say ungrateful for a reason, because most of these women would have far more hardship away from the guy. You know what I mean? So, like, if a guy's providing her a life and they run into some hardship, for her to be resentful is crazy, because if she didn't have that guy, her life would have more financial and logistical hardship. If she was relying on her own self, you know what I mean? She might have way more hardship. So it's like this lack of gratitude. But there you go. Misplaced priorities. You see what I'm saying? Um, it definitely helps if she thinks you're interesting and not boring. That would be the game and seduction skills. Yes. You cannot outgame mental illness, guys. I found out that the hard way too. See, what's nice is on top of my research and development and all the stuff and working with guys, I have also been the guy to fuck up a lot. And so by being that, like, you're probably not going to run into a problem I haven't seen in my own life. Like, things are going pretty well now because I'm an old ass man now. We've made better decisions, but I've had a very rich life of mistake making. And so and one of those would be trying to, thinking that my game and seduction skills, which were very, very high, thinking I can just bang this girl out of her mental illness. You cannot bang a girl out of mental illness, guys. It doesn't work. It might be fun to try for a little bit, but eventually that mental illness catches up to you. And that's a problem, and so we got some good little advice in the chat. And that's cool. Yeah, asking Angela Lansbury her night. We got an Angela Lansbury reference. Thank you. Not most people have no idea what that is. Super pilot-ish. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate the super chat. Um, Algorithm help. You're the man. Love it, man. Thank you very much. You're awesome. Um, Yeah, it's more possible than you think, bro. Unfortunately, again, remember the mistake maker in the room right now. I'm sitting over here on the other side of your computer screen. It is possible, unfortunately, to run through a lot of notches, and it's a lot. I don't know. Maybe I'm not ordinary, but uh, it's possible. You got to ask yourself, though, is it something that's worth it? And most of the time, I would say better quality sexual experiences versus variety. I think that's what guys should strive towards. I'm not sitting here saying not to date, not to sleep with women, okay? But you know, there's a measured way to do it. Sarah lurks. All right. I'm glad you do. None of my friends listen to the advice I learned from Paul. Yeah, I know. They don't. And this is the problem. So they continue to have crap attitudes and crappy relationships. I know, dude. I know. I don't know I'm glad you're listening though, and I appreciate your support. But that's the problem is that people they don't want to hear it, man. This is the one area of life that people ego protect and lie to themselves the most about, which is sex and relationships. People just bullshit themselves. And it's very hard to step away from that. And this is a good question. Yeah, how if they've been married long term, how much of a count could they rack up realistically, though? Right? Well, dude, I don't know, man, because you got girls coming out of high school with 10+ notches. Some of them, you know what I mean? And a lot of these people. Oh, so this is a very good question. Some of the couples that I really got, like I think one couple particularly, they were on their second marriage and they got married in like they were like 40 years old or something, and they were together 20 plus years. You know what I mean? They got married like in their right around when they turned 40. Um, well, got together in their late 30s, maybe, and they had both left a previous relationship. So that's another thing. I know statistically, the rate of success for second and third marriages are lower than the first marriage. However, in a fair amount of these couples that I interviewed, they had come from previous marriages or relationships, previous marriages, and were on their second marriage. I mean, statistically higher than what works out from the numbers. And so that's important to note. You know what I mean? Is that sometimes people don't get it right the first time, and then they learn from their mistakes. I think that's what we learn from that is that it's okay if you make a mistake. It's better not to make a mistake, right? But if you do make that mistake, you can learn from the mistake and do better. And that was one thing I noticed is that not even most of these relationships where I met my high school sweetheart and then we got married. That was only a couple of them. Most of these ones that I had a chance to talk to, again, it's anecdotal, but it tells you something. They were not on their first relationship, and in a lot of cases, not on their first marriage. So they had time to rack some notches up. You know what I mean? Especially like one of the happiest couples I ran into again had they got remarried to each other, right? Or married to each other, second marriage. Um, when they were like 40, I think they were in their because they were in their 70s when I talked to them. So they were in together for over 20 years, almost 30 years, I think, when I talked. I remember the exact one, but it was like right around they met like 39-ish and then remarried like 40, 41 or something. They were around the same age too. And so, yeah, dude, like, I mean, so, and they were like one of the happiest couples I talked to with like they were very actively romantic with each other too. We'll put it like that. I didn't ask them how often they're banging it out, but you know what? They're not, I know that they definitely were, you know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, you can just tell, and even though it's old and weird and gross for most of us to think about, but I mean, it's not me to think about. That's just what they're doing and they're happy doing it. Right. So like, whatever, that's what it takes. And, yeah, anyways, it was interesting. So they all have an opportunity to do it. And certainly women today are taking that opportunity as a rite of passage, you know what I mean, before they hit 25. Many women are going through that and destroying their lives with it. I mean, that's just is what it is. Do you know what I mean? Um, yeah, social media has really destroyed relationships. This is interesting. Red pill died out too fast since, well, I think the red pill died out because too many grifters stepped into it and used it as a brand and have no idea what they're talking about. And then other people would take counter viewpoints to red pill because there's a lot of when you have grifters in the red pill, then you have stupid people saying stupid things. So then other people will go, well, look at the stupid thing this red pill guy said, and then that it makes red pill look bad, and then it just implodes. You know what I'm saying? So that's really what happened with the red pill, is it just imploded because too many stupid people got into it, and then it created the perfect straw man to attack those ideas. You know what I mean? Some of the original thinkers from the red pill community, though, it's not like what they were saying was bad. It was pretty good. But you know what? Not everything's supposed to be an answer to all things, right? And so, no, they did not have a blueprint for a long-term relationship. The red pill community did not have that. They had a blueprint for how not to hurt yourself, okay, and to understand a little bit about female nature, and that's good. That's a good start, right? But you got to take it further than that if you want to be successful in the long-term thing, and that's just it. Um, yeah. Well, thanks for trying to super chat anyway. Um, so Don DeMarco, your free breakup course in the community was immensely helpful back in March. Many thanks. We'll try to super. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, dude. So there's so many things I'm giving away that I mean, I feel like a broken record or like a grifty salesman if I try to list all of them. But yeah, you get in the community, which is free, and right there for you for free in your classroom is some resources. And one of those resources is a breakup recovery course. And it's not a shitty course. It's not a free thing that I use to try to give you a bunch of incomplete information to force you into something, a paid program, which again, it's not bad to have marketing lead-ins for things. And I guess in some ways it could be like that, but that's not what it's for though. The breakup recovery course is because guys literally take their own lives over things like this. Guys destroy their lives over things like breakups. I've had a lot of my military friends who, us military guys, are notorious for getting in retarded relationships and then destroying our own lives. And so I've had that happen so many times over. And when a guy does that, he's probably not going to be able to afford me. He probably needs to afford me, but he's not going to be able to because I'm not cheap to work with. So what do? Right? Do I leave all these guys, all you guys who can't afford me and are destroying your life with a breakup? Do I leave you hanging? No. I would rather give you something that I know works, that is very valuable, give it to you for free. Just, I mean, your support is all it is. You know, being in my community, saying hi every now and then, commenting like Don here did, Donald J. DeMarco did here on my chat. You know what I mean? These things are supporting what I do. And so the cost of your support is a free course that will probably save your fucking life. Seriously. And I would rather have you save your life, become financially viable in the future because you're not destroying yourself with these things. You're leveling yourself up. And then you join a mastermind group or something, or even be one of my elite guys, and we work on higher level problems and get you rich, get you mentally healthy, get you in the right place socially, get you right with women, like all those things. I would rather have you be glad to pay for my coaching program to do those things because because you've leveled your life up like that. So that's why I give that away. You know what I mean? It's not it's not a quick marketing tool like most of these. It's really not a grift, man. Like that course is fucking a lifesaver. No shit. And I really I really think you guys need it, even if you're not in the middle of a breakup. You've if you've been broken up with or gone through that loss before, it's good for you to look at and review some of those things and think about some of those things, because when you don't process trauma and when you don't overcome those things, you're doomed to repeat it. All right. Okay. Well, I got to jump to more things because I'm like, really, I got to talk to a client here in a little bit. All right. Okay, let's talk about some quick things here. All right. So we already covered notch count. All right. These people were not rolling through notches. They had, it's not to say that they were these celibates or these virgins either. I had people, a lot of people in these legacy relationships who were super happy, checked all the blocks with compatibility, capability, and high desire, even 20, 30, 50 years in. There were a fair amount of those who had been in their second marriage. Okay. So they had opportunities to blow through notches, go through hoe phases. Some of the women felt guilty about some of that stuff. But their version of that, what might be casually sleeping with one or two guys within a 6-month period, not like rolling through 6 to 10 guys in a 6-month period, which is very easy thing to do for women today, right? So their mindset when it came to casual partners was much different, and their notch counts were lower. Their ability to bond and pair bond had been preserved, so they hadn't damaged those mechanisms, and so they don't have that to deal with. And you guys who would be dating these people, you wouldn't have that to deal with either. So they were, that was one thing. Okay. And I'm not trying to damn every woman out there who made mistakes and ran through a lot of guys. Okay. It's not the goal, but man, just, you got to know that that's not a common trend for happy, healthy relationships, is a woman who goes through a lot of notches. That's not fitting the norm. That's not, in fact, the girl who goes through a lot of notches tends to be the girl who cheats or is unhappy, or who, you know, ends up just getting bored in the relationships and leaves. So that's one thing. Okay. I mean, what boils down to, again, that pair bonding is a biological mechanism, guys, not a belief system. And so she's got to either preserve that or repair that if she's made mistakes. So that's one thing. Other thing is mindsets. So, you may have heard this from the church circles, but they're somewhat true, is love is a decision, not just a feeling. And so, some of the comments I remember, and I've written them down in my notes, where I heard love is a decision, not a feeling. I heard we chose each other daily. I heard, well, we just we grew together instead of apart when it came to things like financial hardship. All right. Well, we grew together instead of apart. We gave each other grace. Forgiveness is really important. And then they would joke around about stuff they did wrong. That was a common thing. It's kind of cute to see that. They didn't compare themselves to everybody else like the way that women do and a lot of you guys do on social media now, right? This global sexual marketplace is killing things because women's hypergamous brain, they just see the grift of what everybody is supposedly doing online, and that's of course all bullshit and lies anyway, and then they're comparing their own life to that all the time. Well, these people tended to look inward to their relationship and choose to try to build a relationship versus looking outward and comparing themselves to everybody else all the time. That was something that came there. All right, so some behaviors that were trends. This is why I focused on communication, things like Luca and solving conflict, right? And I'm not the only one. Like Gottman Institute, for example, recognized that this is really important. So behaviors, as they would describe many of them would call fighting fair. They fought fair. So they approached the fights they would have as trying to solve problems versus attacking each other's character and devaluing each other. They didn't have that sense of devaluing each other. I asked questions like, well, did you ever like just feel like this or want to, and they would be like, what? Like, no, like, why would you say that about somebody? You're right. And some of them were just so confused as to why you would be critical to to person you're with like that, or why you would have contempt, or why you like this shaming that women do with the guys that they're with, and they talk shit about their guys with their friends. Like a lot of these women were like, "What? Like, why would you do that? What? That's embarrassing. That would be embarrassing to me to talk about him like that. What do you mean?" Like they just didn't understand. Like they didn't have this sense of just being disrespectful all the time to each other. Like that was not a trend for these 20 different couples. It's really important to notice. You know what I mean? They're just living in a totally different world where now it's the norm for men and women to just be disrespectful and talk shit about each other on social media, to their friends, to family, everybody else, to each other. Like that was not something that these people did. And when I would ask questions kind of alluding to that, like, well, did you ever get frustrated? And they were like, what? You don't do that to somebody you're married to. Like they were just like, what? Like you got to be kidding me. So that was an interesting thing. um, they tended to share, this is compatibility. So they tended to share the same vision for their life. And the men tended to lead that. Even in the case of stronger, dominant women in these relationships, they would consider themselves that. The guy was the leader. Even when the guy seemed a little passive to me, but again, I'm a little overly aggressive as a male, so maybe I'm a little judgy on that, but I noticed that when the guy was leading, and if the guy said something and like was like that's it, the woman would comply with that. Generally speaking, they didn't take each other that seriously. That was the thing. A lot of humor, and I don't know if that's the age or what, but I mean, they just really did not take each other that seriously. They could laugh at themselves, and I think that maybe is a demonstration of not having this huge ego. You know what I mean? And this huge, just self-esteem problem. Like they didn't consider themselves all that important. Even in the cases where the guy was like super successful or whatever, like the guy just didn't consider himself like, oh, I need to think like I'm the shit, like all this internet posturing and people thinking they're so awesome and not being able to like just sort of joke around with each other and not take each other seriously. Like I that was not a thing. I mean, they generally speaking, I don't remember a single case where the couples didn't have a good sense of humor, have a lightheartedness towards each other. I think that's really important, having the lightheartedness, because then you're less likely to see the other person as the enemy or to have contempt for them when they make a mistake. More likely to have forgiveness if you can be lighthearted. How many women today are lighthearted? You know what I mean? How many women who are in their mid 30s, right? 40s have a lighthearted nature right now in the United States or in any part of the West? It's kind of missing, isn't it? And they wonder why they're fucking failing, right? Um, yeah, so we talked about the patterns of sexual behavior. I won't go through that again. Um, some psychological things. They tended to be more selective, right? And who they would date. That was just a normal thing when they talked about their dating life. Again, I mentioned this already, less comparing, you know what I mean? More focused inward and building, less in competition with others. Um, and they seem to have had developed a lot of those habits before getting into a relationship. So like a lot of their past, like their pre-relationship behaviors set them up for success. So I didn't see a lot of evidence of somebody being like a crazy fucked up person and then they get into a relationship and now they're better. You know what I mean? I didn't see evidence of that. It was usually like they had decent patterns to start with and then they improved on those patterns. This is why in my compatibility test that I have my mastermind guys use for themselves, all right? That's not a free resource mastermind right now. Maybe I'll make it free at some point. Okay, but that compatibility thing is important because if somebody is low on the scale of compatibility and you assess that when you're dating, the likelihood of them drastically changing who they are to now all of a sudden be a highly compatible partner, that's not something you can count on because that usually doesn't happen, right? So you're just trying to save a hoe, basically, as a guy, if that's what you're dealing with, She has to have at least a baseline of healthy behaviors to build off of once she gets in your frame and in a relationship. If she doesn't have that, you need to probably cut your ties. And to that woman who is that person who has bad behaviors, it's up to her to work on herself to improve that. Improve to herself that she can be healthy, right? Because she can't just be stuck there in that. Um they didn't have these relationships of distrust. That was another important thing. They didn't protect their privacy from each other in these weird ways that people do now. Don't look in my phone. You know what I mean? Like that idea would be like, what? What do you mean? Don't look at my phone. What if I stop breathing and you got to get in my phone and text somebody or call some help? Like, what do you mean? Like these elderly couples, they had no idea like this protecting of privacy in this weird way that people do now. That's not even that was completely absent. And it seemed to have been completely absent from the beginning. So that's a trend to think about. Um and you know, they just had lower senses of jealousy. They didn't do things to make each other jealous, and they didn't, have that distrust for each other. Now, some of this could be because they've been together 20, 30 plus years and they just built that over time. But either way, it's a good observation to make. I think highly distrusting relationships are set up for failure. All right. And so this is why we have to have that transparency. I talk about that. Okay, with in my communities and the like in before here on YouTube. It's why transparency is so important and having the healthy communication so important because you just got to be able to trust the person you're with after a point. You get to a point where if you can't trust them, then you shouldn't be with them. You know what I mean? But that also means on the other side, not doing untrustworthy things. So you didn't have these ladies going on girls' vacations with their single friends who cheat. You know what I mean? Like you didn't have, oh, I'm going to a bachelorette party where we're going to go to the male strip club or do a bunch of cocaine or whatever. Like this shit was not happening. Okay. With these elderly, they don't have any story like that. Right. So all this fucking crazy stuff that women in their 20s are doing now and even in their 30s. Like, sorry, that doesn't fit well. You want to be a party girl and be go fucking slut around on a Friday night. Good, have fun, but you're not. Don't even try a long term relationship at that point. Don't even try it. Just be casual and be your strong, independent self. You know what I mean? If that's what a chick's gonna do, you know what I mean. And same with you guys. Like none of these guys were like club promoters. You know what I mean? No offense to my club promoter friends, but and I'm not saying that and I'm not saying they couldn't have been, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like you have to be able to be happy in a stable lifestyle with somebody, not chasing this fast lifestyle and think that those two things are going to go together. They just don't. And they didn't seem to go together with these people. I'm not saying you can't do things a little differently, right? For yourself, but just something to notice. All right. So, in closing, okay, because I got to get to my appointment. No, the past doesn't doom you, but it does shape your habits. Okay, people can retrain their attachment styles, their intimacy skills, and their relationship skills. You can retrain yourself, but it takes work. It takes effort. You have to shift your priorities. You have to learn skills. And some of these skills and some of these priorities you have not even thought of, which is why you need a second opinion from somebody who knows. I'm a resource for that, but I'm not the only one. Okay. You need to get what you think is true and good is probably wrong, unless you are doing a happy, healthy relationship right now, unless you have everything you want right now and it's going in the right direction. Chances are there are flaws in your thinking and behavior. You need to check that with somebody who knows because the world out there is not going to help you. It's going to harm you. Okay. So you can intentional bonding and having a long term relationship that's successful. Okay. It's a learned behavior. It's not something that you're going to do automatically. All right. And so you got to recognize that. And you have to approach that with maturity, honesty, and personal accountability and responsibility. And you need to instill that for you guys. You need to instill that in the women that you're dating. And if they're unwilling to have that personal accountability and that recognition that they need to learn some skills too, and that doesn't make them a bad person, it just makes them a human being. If there isn't that recognition that that's something you both need to develop together and that there's growth that needs to happen together, she's not going to be able to do it. You know what I'm saying? And so that's that. Okay. So I'm going to let you guys go on with your day. Thanks again.